So even though I was local, born and raised in Hawaii, I've never gotten a tan. In the literal sense, my skin is as pale as the sand, but also in comprehending why locals seem to love emphasizing, bruh, you gotta get a tan. And of course, yes, we live in Hawaii where there's a lot of sun and exposure to sunlight produces vitamin D. But there seems to be this dichotomy in Hawaii about getting tan, where some people absolutely are obsessed with the importance of someone getting tan, while at the same time there are some locals who seem to have an almost aversion to sunlight, where they will avoid it at all costs, particularly some of those older Asian women. And I'm not here to be critical of this somewhat inconsistency, but I'm just wondering if anybody else noticed this as well. Because it's kind of hard when the aunties are telling me I gotta go outside and get a tan, while at the same time, those same aunties are the ones holding up the umbrella. I mean, small kind mixed signals, you know what I mean?
Hello from Hawaii.
I don't normally walk around with an umbrella, but I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a shot for this video. I think I started first noticing Hawaii's obsession, or some local people's obsession with getting tan, when I was a lot younger as a kid, when I played a lot of golf. Because if you know anything about golf, you're oftentimes outside for hours. And so what would happen is I would develop a golf tan where my arms and my legs were very dark, but the rest of my body, my chest, and more so in particular, my feet were super white. I became very self-conscious of this, especially as a little kid, because anytime I would take off my shoes to go in the house, or I would wear slippers outside, people would see my very glaring sock tan. And upon seeing my feet, they would say, "Brother, your feet so white. You gotta go outside, go get one tan." And ironically, it was because I went outside so much that I did get a tan. But I get it. Being tan is just part of the culture here in Hawaii. It means you go out to the beach and enjoy the outdoors. And just purely aesthetically, when you have a tan, your body tends to look better. Your muscles are more defined. You just seem healthier. I don't know what it is, but you just seem healthier and more attractive. Of course, we know all of the dangers with skin cancer and the exposure to excessive sunlight that can happen to your skin and the damage that it does cause, but still a lot of people, particularly younger people in Hawaii, they just love going to the beach and they want that golden brown tan. And I remember trying to rectify my bad tan line, especially on my ankles. I would sit in the shade and then I would stick my ankles out so that my ankles would become even with my calves. But of course that was nearly impossible because my feet would get too hot, and by the end of it, I'd be like, what am I doing this for? It makes absolutely no sense. So there's this one side of Hawaii that is saying, okay, you gotta go outside as much as you can, or you gotta go outside and get nice and tan, make your body look nice, look healthier. But it's so strange because oftentimes many of these people, especially now that I'm an adult, many of these people who are telling me to go outside and get a tan, are they themselves now trying to avoid being in the sun? And I'm not just talking about the older Korean women who are outside all dressed up with the umbrella and hat and gloves and sleeves. I think it's a cultural thing, but let me just say that their aversion to the sun and staying out of it absolutely works. I mean, have you seen their skin? Man, it looks great. Speaking of which, I think there's one right there right now, walking around. Oh, there goes the hood. So I'm not really talking about them. I'm talking more about the local people who seem to do whatever it takes to not stand in the sun, especially while they're waiting for the crosswalk. I see it all the time. Like if they're coming up to the light post and they push the little button, and they will do whatever it takes to stand right here in this shaded area just to make sure it blocks out the sun. This cannot be right here. You can't do this, but this, oh, right there. Now, standing in the shade isn't too noticeable, and I know because Hawaii sometimes, you know, get kind of hot, but I've seen people who are waiting for the crosswalk, they'll go 10, 20 feet out of their way to stand in the shade. And then they'll rush in as soon as the light turns and then they cross the street. And I get it, small kind hot. I mean, you know, you don't want to be standing too much in the sun, but I figure you're only gonna be standing there for maybe 30 to 45 seconds. And in fact, the temperature is actually the same in the shade versus not in the shade. It's just how your skin feels. So the temperature doesn't actually change. But to me, this is where the inconsistency lies, where people seem to not want to stand in the sun for 30 to 45 seconds while they're just waiting for the crosswalk. And yet we have this culture that emphasizes going outside and getting a tan. And I figured would be a great opportunity to stand in the sun and potentially get a tan, even if it's just for 45 seconds. But it seems like a lot of people don't. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't stand in the shade. Whenever I'm out with my son and I'm pushing the stroller, I always make sure to give him shade. But I don't go out of my way to stand necessarily in the shade, especially when I'm waiting for the crosswalk. And because of that, I get moderate exposure to the sun, and I have the watch tan to prove it. Now, as I've gotten older, I've gotten less insecure about the color of my skin, which, taken out of context, sounds very political, but we're talking about tan lines here, so not as serious. I mean, when we go to the beach, I see that there are people who have very nice tans. I just happen to not be one of them, but that's okay. Those people just spend a lot more time outdoors without a shirt on, while I spend a lot more time indoors. And on the occasion where I do spend time outdoors, I'm usually finding ways to cover up. Now, although the topic of Hawaii's obsession and aversion to getting tan is observational and lighthearted, I hope it just points out that not all local people in Hawaii think alike. We all value different things, we all have different preferences. And of course, that can be said about people anywhere. And also, what people may say versus what they may actually do is sometimes quite the opposite. So just keep that in mind. As isolated as we are, Hawaii consists of a mixture of people, not just different ethnicities, but people of different values and preferences. Yet at the same time, our local culture, our Hawaii culture, blankets all of us, and it binds together our similarities and differences. And that's part of what makes Hawaii such a great place to live. So thanks for watching, and aloha.